timed song was my presentation on Streaming Killed the Radio Star. So hi, my name is Ash Johnson, and this is my presentation called Streaming Killed the Radio Star. This is my thesis, which is that the downfall of the cultural importance of AM and FM radio started in the early 2010s and was caused by changes in the economy, the lack of music being played on the radio by new and or upcoming artists, the importance of the internet and social media, and music downloading/streaming being invented and popularized. My thesis, this is a shortened version of it right here. That's not going to stay on the screen for long. But before we get into any of that, let's talk about the rise and fall of radio over time. It started in about 1930 with 40% of American households owning radios. Then, only 10 years later, it doubled. In 1950, it went up a little bit, but not too much, until it stagnated for 60 years, all the way until 2008, only going up 1% during that time. Now, you may think that that's a bad thing, but anything staying the same for 60 years and not changing is pretty impressive. But by 2022, it's dropped down to 61% of American households having radios. So let's put this on a scatter plot. You can kind of see the trend here. It goes up, stagnates, and goes down. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to put a line of best fit, or LSRL, least squares residual line. What this does is it minimizes the sum of residuals squared, but as you can see, there's no correlation here, which means that it's not linear, and a line of best fit will not work on this graph. If you wanted a line that would work, you could try something like this. This is a quadratic line, and it's basically just an upside-down U-shaped line. Now, while it might look like AM and FM radio has become completely irrelevant, commercially it's still thriving. According to this graph made by Edison Research, AM and FM radio is still the most popular way to listen to music during the modern day. I conducted a survey around Brainworks to see students' listening habits. So the first question I asked was, what mediums do you listen to? And to no one's surprise, music streaming services won out, and AM and FM radio came behind, but it wasn't close because there was an 11-point difference. Now, the second question I asked was, what do you listen to the most out of all these available options? And we have all the available options here, but it does not matter in the slightest because 100% of students said music streaming services. So the next question I asked was a two-part question. Do you think music streaming services are better than radio? To which 100% of students said yes. And the second part was, why? Why do you think it's better than radio? Well, I got 3 of the most common answers, which were, streaming gives you more control over what is played, people talk too much on the radio, like DJs or talk show hosts, and their favorite artists aren't often on the radio. Now, while it may seem biased that I only sent out this survey to students, this presentation is meant to show how AM and FM radio is becoming irrelevant in the current generation. No offense. No offense. Now, I have a question. Who here has heard their favorite songs or one of their favorite songs on the radio before? You.
I can't name them right now.
Okay.
Put me on the spot.
Who else? You. How did it make you feel?
Happy.
Okay, well, did you know that that happiness you feel may be caused by chemicals, or is caused by chemicals in your brain? More specifically, the happy chemicals. There are 4 of them: oxytocin, which is the love hormone, endorphins, which is the painkiller, dopamine, the rewarding chemical, and serotonin, the mood stabilizer. Now, we're going to be focusing on dopamine for this presentation. You may be thinking, what is dopamine? Well, it's a neurotransmitter, and our nervous system uses it to send messages between our nerve cells. What does it do? Well, it affects your body, brain, and behavior, plays a role in how we feel pleasure and rewards, it's part of our ability to think and plan, and it helps us focus, work towards goals, and even find things interesting. So let's dive into the molecular structure of dopamine. All these lines, these points here, 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 those are all carbon. And these double lines right here, Those are double bonds. Dopamine is made up of two hydroxides, which are here and here, the far ones, and nitrogen to hydrogen, which is an amine group. Dopamine also has a covalent and ionic bond. And you may be thinking, covalent bond, ionic bond, what is a bond in the first place? Well, a chemical bond is an attraction between two or more atoms that form a chemical. But let's get more specific. An ionic bond is when electrons are transferred from between the atoms, and they're formed when an atom gives up one or more electrons to another atom. A covalent bond is when electrons are shared between the atoms. So let's skip to this middle part of my thesis real quick. I have another question. Do you feel more happy hearing one of your favorite songs on the radio rather than streaming services? And if you've never heard your favorite song on the radio, would you feel more happy hearing it on the radio? Yeah. Well, this is because of this quote from Psychology Today. Humans grow tolerant to repeated dopaminergic activity and need more to keep up the previous enjoyment achieved. For example, enjoying your favorite treat every day would diminish the euphoria you feel when eating it more moderately. Now, music streaming services are like the treat in this scenario and could numb your reaction to hearing your favorite song on a streaming service because you're so much more likely to hear it there. You might put a song you like on repeat on purpose, or you might hear it on a playlist because the way that music streaming services work is they don't play through your whole playlist before repeating songs. They go through it a bit and then throw back in some songs. So it doesn't go through the whole thing and you might hear it more. Either way, hearing a song you like on radio is way less likely to happen, especially if your favorite smartist is small, independent, or not internationally known. These artists won't get airplay due to these reasons, making it understandable why so many people choose streaming services as their primary listening source. Now, the reason you probably won't hear your favorite artist on the radio is because of the Telecommunications Act of 1996. It was signed by President Bill Clinton and was alleged to allow any business to compete in the communications sphere, but what it actually did was allow corporate media giants to buy out small local broadcasters. Now, before this act was implemented, strict laws limited how many broadcast stations a single entity could own in TV and radio, and strict rules about cross-ownership, or owning a radio station and owning a radio station and a TV station in the same market. When this act was implemented, radio station ownership dropped from over 4,000 owners to from over 5,000 owners to under 4,000. One of these big companies that bought up all the little stations is iHeartMedia or iHeartRadio. Now, raise your hand if you've heard of iHeartRadio or iHeartMedia. Yeah, everyone has. It's a huge company. Now, what you may not know is that iHeartMedia owns over 800 radio stations across the country. Now, 800 radio stations split across the 50 states is 16 radio stations in each state. That's 16 radio stations in each state that sound the exact same to one another. The way that these radio stations choose their programming in the modern day is by using focus groups and market researchers to find out what music is the safest to play on all of their stations. This often results in the same repeated generic poppy type music that you might hear on a radio station like K-Joy here in Stockton. Now, all of this reminds me of a quote from Fahrenheit 451. In this quote, Faber says to Montag, "Do you know why books such as this are so important? Because they have quality. And what does the word quality mean? To me, it means texture. This book has pores." Texture is the way something feels. Texture gives things dimension. So when Faber says, this book has texture, he means it's different, that it's not the same as the rest, and that it has individuality. And this is why this quote reminds me of the radio. Before this act, radio had more variety, and not just the radio, but the DJs themselves. If you were listening to the radio in New York, the chances that your DJ was loud and bright and all of these things was pretty high because New York is known for having that kind of atmosphere, so the DJs mimicked the environment. But if you were listening to the radio in rural Iowa, you weren't going to hear the same energy from the radio DJ. But let's dive into Fahrenheit a little bit more. Fahrenheit 451 follows Guy Montag, a fireman whose job is to burn books in a world where reading is illegal. There are many reasons for this, like a general lack of interest in reading, other entertainment like TVs and radios, and lifestyles with too much stimulation like fast cars and loud music. Another reason, and the main reason that books are banned, is because the leaders in this world are envious and they don't like feeling inferior. They don't like feeling powerless, so they ban books because they want control over the people, and what's a better way to gain control over the people than to ban the only thing you can't control? Another book that has a theme of the higher-ups controlling the people is The Crucible. Now, in The Crucible, it takes place in the Puritan town of Salem during the Salem witch trials. The Puritans were a very strict religious group, and they wanted everyone to think what they thought, say what they said, and believe what they believed. An example of this we can see in the book is when Reverend Hale questions Proctor about his poor attendance to church. He asks Proctor to recite the 10 Commandments, but Proctor can only recall 9 and almost gets in trouble for it until his wife Elizabeth reminds him of the last one. Now you may think that this is just a small mistake, that he almost remembered all 10, and that this isn't a problem in the long run. But when Proctor tells Hale this, Hale says, "Theology, sir, is a fortress. No crack in a fortress may be accounted small." So he's basically saying that Puritans, this religion, is like a fortress, and no mistake made in this religion may be counted as just that, a mistake. Going back to the telecommunications, so we're going to focus on this part of my thesis right here, the changes in the economy. Going back to the Telecommunications Act, when big corporations bought these radio stations out, they also got rid of some too. This caused a lot of job losses for programmers, producers, radio DJs, and more. Then, to cut costs for the stations they did own, corporations would do things like hire a small team of people that would create one program to spread across all the stations they own. This reminds me of a lot of industrialization after the Civil War. During this time, machines replaced lots of manual labor, and while this increased profits for all the factory owners, this decreased jobs for poor Americans. States north of the Mason-Dixon line were in the beginning phases of the Industrial Revolution, while the southern states still relied mostly on agriculture as their source of income. This made it completely impossible for the smaller farmers to keep up with everything now that these big corporations had machines to do the work for them. This is a primary source article I found, and it's an interview with a shoemaker during the time that worked during the Industrial Revolution. And the whole thing is 7 pages, so I can't read the full thing, but I did pick out a couple of important quotes from it. The machines in the shoe shops didn't only change the way shoes were made, but it changed the whole way that people lived. It was soon after the Civil War that the machine age began and the shoe business grew. Then, over here, it details the Mackay machine, which it says was run by a foot pedal. Down here it says, the Mackay machine drove the hand workers out. So this machine drove all of these hand workers out of business, out of a job, because all you had to do to run the machine was to put your foot on a pedal. This is an image of what one of these factories might have looked like at the time. So let's focus on this next part of my thesis, which is the importance of the internet and social media and all of this. Now, social media plays a big part in this topic in many ways, like, other one? Like artists using it to promote their music without needing a label, and so on. But we're going to focus on the community aspect of social media for this presentation. And I think the perfect example of that is Spotify Wrapped. I think everyone knows what Spotify Wrapped is, but for those that don't, Spotify Wrapped keeps track of your listening habits throughout the year, and at the beginning of December releases a little mini presentation that shares your stats and things like how long you listen for, your top artists, top 5 songs, and more. Now this year they took a lot of that out, which is why a lot of people are talking about it, especially this year. But nonetheless, each year it is an event that is talked about, that gets people talking about these streaming services, and that it's another reason to use streaming services instead of radio. Now we're going to talk about this last part of my thesis, which is music downloading and streaming being invented and popularized. We're going to focus on streaming for this presentation because it's the big kicker that kind of caused the downfall of radio. And here we have what I think are the four horsemen of music streaming: Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music, and YouTube Music. Now, Apple Music and YouTube Music were both created in 2015 and became popular about the same time, with Spotify being created in 2008 and becoming popular in 2013, and Pandora being created in 2000 and becoming popular in about 2010 to 2012. Now, we can notice a theme with all of these music streaming services, which is that they really all became popular within kind of the same time period, the early to mid 2010s. Now, this matches up to this graph here. This graph states that Americans now spend more time with audio through a mobile device than a traditional radio receiver. Here we can see that up in 2022, mobile devices has now passed AM and FM audio receivers at 33.3 versus audio receivers AM and FM at 33.1. So let's put this on a scatter plot. This is much better for a line of best fit because this is a strong positive correlation. It's linear and has no obvious outliers. This is something we can put the line of best fit through. The equation for the line of best fit is y hat equals mx plus b, with mx being the slope and b being the y-intercept. Now let's also check out the AM and FM audio receiver and see how that looks on a graph with a line of best fit. As you can see, this one has a couple outliers, but nothing super obvious, and for the most part, I'd say it's a moderately strong decline. Now you may be thinking, so what? Why does any of this matter? Well, I conducted an interview with my expert, and his name is Grant Random, and he's a radio DJ for Sirius XM, and I think he'll explain this.
What's your opinion on streaming? Do you think the pros and cons of streaming, do you think the pros outweigh the cons on radio, or do you think radio and streaming each have their own benefits?
What I would say is, I think there's room for everybody, right? I don't think that it has to be one platform over everyone else. For some people, listening to FM radio for music is fine. Like, they don't mind the commercials, they don't mind the selection, or maybe that there's less variety. Like, whatever is there works. There's people then that, have come to satellite radio and maybe are using that in addition to AM and FM radio, or maybe have fully moved over to satellite, and that's great for them because you have more channels, you have more variety, but you still have some of the things that maybe via radio, right, which is like hosts like me that bring a human element to it, versus the streaming services, which are, mostly unhosted. So it's just an endless stream of music. Some people like to have the human elements interspersed throughout the experience, which is why for a lot of folks, they love Sirius XM. Other people like to not have any of that, and I totally understand it, where you get a streaming service that's just spitting out music. So I think that since we have more ways to consume music, we have people who have more options than ever before, and we see that there are people that like all of those options. I guess the long answer short is that I see a place for every medium.
What's your opinion?
Don't do that. Now, I also think there is room in the industry for each type of listening, but as it stands, I think AM and FM radio is an outdated platform that is unable to grow and change due to these large corporations owning the stations. I hope that someday radio evolves to be more individualized again, and stations become more different and distinct from one another, instead of playing the same 5 Taylor Swift songs on loop every hour. But until then, radio seems to be on a downward trend, and streaming services are there to take its place. And all of this is why streaming killed the radio star. That's my presentation.
Sorry, I'm just seeing this. Ash, this is a great presentation. You're a really engaging, natural presenter. It's easy to listen to, and you have like variation in your pacing and inflection that make it really engaging. So this was great. Speaking of your history, you had some extra research in there on the Telecommunications Act, which provided really strong context for your topic. Then you went into the industrial age, and it worked well. You had a good primary source. I think sometimes I like that you constantly went back to your thesis. Sometimes those connections went really quick, so I think spend just a little more time there. But overall, there was a lot of really good things here, and I love how you utilized your expert interview as such a focused part of your presentation. So great work.
Test. Okay. I feel like as a presenter, you've dialed in like your energy, and it comes across that you're an expert, on your topic. And I think it's because you have passion and you've got research, and those two together make you an authority on the subject. And that's kind of what we want to see out of Defensive Mastery, is kids becoming someone who is authoritative and knowledgeable about the things that they're passionate about. I think you did a really good job jumping into Fahrenheit and the Crucible with those kinds of, like in Fahrenheit, it's all just the sameness, and there's this frustration in media and stuff like that. I think, obviously you didn't need both of them, and I think making the connection to your thesis a little bit more would help make that point ring, but the analysis you did was really good, and then the connective stuff to it in between the integrations was really good too, so it's just a matter of pulling it a little bit closer, but you've made some real improvements, especially over the last year, and I'm real proud of you.
Was your expert interview the product?
Yes, that was my product.
There's a lot of good things here. I definitely seen some improvement here. I really like how you started with the song at the beginning. Okay.
Yeah, it was very poorly timed, but
no, it was good. And then you did this thing where you were like, when you tied back to your thesis, you were going back to questions for the audience. And so it's like, okay, I'm gonna go to the next step of my thesis by asking you this question. And that was creative. I haven't seen too many people do that before. You were doing a lot of sources and primary sources. That was good. And then you're engaging, very engaging in your presentation style. So this is definitely your wheelhouse, is presenting and kind of like injecting your personality into it. So you just had a lot of really good things here, and nice job.
Yeah, I agree. I'm kind of bummed it's a Friday and we have so few students here, because it would have been cool. You have mastered the art of audience engagement, because you don't need a gimmick or a trick to keep your audience engaged. What you're saying is interesting, and you say it in an interesting way. I loved how your presentation started with the song. I loved how you spoke about the math when it made sense to speak about the math. You worked hard on it. You came back to me so many times, and so that was really cool to see the efforts that you were putting forth in there. But I really enjoy your presentation, and I think you should be proud. And it's cool to see you get to shine in something and take pride in something, and to know that you can do it well. So I'm proud of you. Good job.
Thank you.